Hey, welcome to TNT Live, our first episode in a while. Sorry, Wyatt's been busy at work and his home's being renovated, and I decided to go out at night and yell at strangers and resume doing stand-up comedy because news is now illegal. News is now not allowed to happen in Canada thanks to Bill C-11 and C-18. So that'll be our main story tonight. What is Bill C-11? What is Bill C-18? And how do they affect Canadian media? So last week, everyone was upset because Meta, Facebook, and Instagram were going to block Canadian news content in Canada, and now Google is going to block Canadian news content as well. So if you are unfamiliar with running an online news site, let me fill you in on a secret that Wyatt and I know well. That's the majority of our traffic is Meta and Google. That is a lot where people get their news. This basically leaves us with Twitter and maybe Reddit, which Reddit's far left and doesn't really.
You'll get kicked off there for misgendering someone in 5 minutes.
Yeah, like we were never long for Reddit. Doesn't matter. So it's basically Twitter's the last one standing. Unless either the tech companies or the government blink, but I think it's less likely that the tech companies blink if there's two of them now. So that's where we are. Why? Do you want to give your overview?
No, I was just going to say at least the saving grace for something like the National Telegraph is that we're probably not even considered news. So right now, Facebook will probably not target us because we haven't registered with them or anything like that. So at the very least, the stream will fly under the radar. And because maybe the website's hosted from Squarespace, it'll be considered an American news source or something like that. So maybe it is great to not be considered real Canadian content for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean that is the silver lining. That's the thing that lets me sleep at night is I don't think the government's ever classified us as news, which is good. We might be able to slip under the radar for a bit and be like, this is a blog about feelings, maybe, and do some stuff. But I mean, I do see through this. I think the eventual push here is quite clearly the destruction of alternative media. It is destroy online media because online media is a danger to the government or the Liberal government more specifically, and the solution there is to make online news media highly unprofitable and then bail out the mainstream media news sources so they can still put things on TV and they can put things in newspapers where good liberal boomers get their news, where my aunts and uncles get their news. They get their news from the standard ones. My mom subscribes to the Toronto Star. It's the only thing she reads. So knows for a fact
maybe it's not even the Toronto Star anymore.
Sorry?
It's Postmedia's Toronto Star.
Yeah, and then Postmedia and the Toronto Star are going to merge. I mean, Canada's a friggin' joke. I think it's we had two tech companies. Now we'll have two media companies, one government, one also government. And prices will be insane and everything will be monopolized by some corporate giant that's in bed with the tech companies.
And just this idea, and maybe we'll start off with Bill C-18 because it's the main one, then move on to Bill C-11. Yeah. The justifications from the Liberal government on why we need to get big tech to pay journalists is so stupid. This would be like grocery stores having to pay the people that they buy products from to have them on the shelves, or they'd have to pay them an extra rental fee or something like that to have Rice Krispies on the shelves. It's stupid.
It's like someone the best analogy. Someone said it's a finder's fee, except the finder's fee is the person
the founder's fee. I find it for you, give it to you, and then you owe me.
Yeah, it's the finder's fee is okay, I found someone really talented. This guy's a great software engineer. Here you are, Google. Hire him. Oh, great. There's a good finder's fee. But this is the person who finds the talent has to pay them for the privilege of introducing them to Google. Then what's the point of this?
Yeah, and again, it's just the Liberal government, even though the Liberals are some of the most corporate, big bloated business people you've ever met, they're pretending we're trying to fight big bloated business on behalf of strong independent media or whatever. It's guys, we're having more media monopolization than ever because the actual costs that go into running a media company are like sky high. Unless you're willing to do it for free, you're just not going to make it. That's why, again, even Torstar and like Post Media need to combine themselves just so they don't go under. So unless you're like these organizations getting massive like payouts from the government, or you're the CBC who gets $1 billion a year from the government, you're obviously not going. You obviously, if you're going to get any viewership, you're going to have to go on social media. And while the Liberals are claiming that what they are trying to do is get media like journalists paid, obviously probably the ulterior motive and the main motive was to get into a stupid fight with Facebook and Google so that they just turn off all media, so that the only media anyone gets is on television or on is either on television or it's on like physical newspapers. So effectively, we're just going to restrict the media, the I guess means of communicating, because that's easier than actually cracking down on independent media directly.
I bring up the comment from Diverged Media. I think give them a shout out. Like, this is Greg here saying this is going to screw up the release of our documentary about Canadians, meant for Canadians, but Canadians won't be able to find it. Trudeau admires China's basic dictatorship has come home to roost. Yeah, and I mean, so Greg, it's about killing alternative media while pretending to support media. I agree. And Greg brings up a good point. This is, I think, the C-11 part, where the lie behind C-11 is, oh, we want to get more Canadian content to Canadians. Like, the joke I always make is like, what C-11 purports to do is you type Ben Shapiro video into YouTube. It reads, it says, sorry, did you mean Canadian fast-talking Jew? And puts me in front of you instead. That's not going to happen, right? No one, right? I don't see myself ever benefiting from the government thing. So when Greg's saying he's working a documentary about the Freedom Convoy and the fallout there, that's a Canadian issue by a Canadian journalist meant to disseminate information to Canadians. And these new laws will make it exponentially more difficult for him to accomplish that goal. And the purported justification for the laws was to make it easier for Canadians like Greg to make content about Canadian issues. And that is not the sentiment.
People have to understand what the actual CRTC regulations are and what they consider Canadian, because what they are going to try and do is import the exact same stupid regulations they have for movies and television and radio, in which, like, yeah, a movie might have a bunch of Canadian actors in it and it might be filmed in Canada, but is the producer Canadian? Who was giving all the beverages on set and crap like that? So they have this very strange definition of what is a Canadian product. It could be shot in Mumbai, but as long as the people who were providing all the catering and were shooting the movie were Canadian, it could be considered a Canadian production based on the CRTC's point system. So, and this is where Pablo Rodriguez and Justin Trudeau with C-18, with the combination of C-11, have created a win-win sort of scenario for themselves, where basically what they can do, and also C-18 does just give another $300 million to the legacy media, so that's also something in that bill. But so C-18 is going to say, we're going to try and get journalists paid by big tech. One, extremely unlikely to happen, just as we saw with Google and Meta basically pulling the plug immediately, saying we're not going to pay. And even in the theoretical world where they actually were willing to pay something like the Canadian government, and they negotiate and they pay small amounts of money that aren't even really that much, well, the Canadian government's also in control of the algorithm for whose articles come up first. So they basically get to pick and choose who Facebook and Google pay for the articles, because they get to figure out what shows up in your feed.
Yeah, it's an absolute cluster F-bomb. And I'm not so interested in the government's motivations, because, since 2019, I've been saying the goal of the Trudeau administration is to monopolize flow of information, destroy alternative media. You look at the $600 million media bailout, you look at them suing and attacking Rebel News and True North Media. The next logical step was to go for internet censorship, which they've been trying to do it's been a linchpin of their thing. So I don't think there was any good intentions behind this. I think it was purely calculated authoritarianism. I think this is the result they wanted. I think it's the result they're getting. I think they see a win-win. If there's no news on Facebook or Google, that's good, because then people aren't consuming news. They're not and they control the media. The only news people can see is the TV and newspaper news, which they pay for anyway, which doesn't do any hard-hitting anti-government stuff. they're all anti-convoy and we're willing to lie about COVID and all that stuff. So there's a win. And if they do pay, right, you control the algorithm, you can push your stuff to the top, and you can create a sneaky algorithm that financially incentivizes people to push government narratives and call it journalism. Win-win. You destroy the country, win-win. I am much more interested in the people, the Truanons, supporting it. Because in order to get this law stopped, the average Canadian has to look at this and say, whoa. Not the Canadians who've been listening to people like you and me talk for years, because they understand, they get it. And it's not a knock on the people in the audience. I'm simply saying the people in the audience, I
You're
assume
way
all
ahead of the
the
game.
plus 2 is 4, right? And we go on, but it's sort of like the people in your family, the people who don't do this, the people who aren't politically engaged, because this is such a silly thing. And there's this thinnest justification for it, right? We want to get journalists paid. Oh, they want to, and we want, right? The JAGME. We want the big tech companies to pay their fair share. So is there a general communist level misunderstanding of economics where we just can't think 3 steps ahead? Or is it so tribalistic that it's defend the dear leader at all costs? And is there a way that if this is explained to them, that it will make those with principles say, hold on a minute, we can't be having this as a bit authoritarian, and they start to lose those centrist urbanite people? Because if without a backlash from center people, Canadian urbanites who perceive themselves as centrists, let's call it that, right? You can, whatever you want to call this category, Canadian urbanites who perceive themselves to be centrist. This is sort of what drives the Liberal Party think tank.
And again, yeah, the frustration, the frustrating thing about it can be just the fact that a lot of people assume that because the government's doing something, there's something inherently good or inherently reasonable about it, or people who will just see that we're going after big tech, and their minds will just kind of invent a reason why what the government's doing is reasonable when they're effectively just robbing big tech. But yeah, you go on.
Yeah, that these are all good points, because I mean, again, so I'm less worried about screaming commies online because they'll never be reasonable. But we have to get to a point where how can we convince upper middle class urbanites that this is a pretty scary thing? Because part of their ethos is they believe themselves to be very politically aware, very cultured. They have a greater understanding of political machinations than the silly people online who actually understand these issues and looked into them before the CBC told them about them. But there's a thing where the people who perceive themselves to be centrists do want to be somewhat contrarian sometimes, and it's just a means of activating that I think we need to find a way to do better as the Canadian right, because some of the Trudeau stuff is so actually crazy that if explained to someone, there's no way they can support it. It's like a lot of the gender stuff, which we can get into later. It's like once men competing with women and explained to a reasonable person, they're usually against it. Just as someone should have, someone who's a fancy lawyer in Toronto or a mid-range lawyer in Toronto, whatever, has this explained to them, they should be able to understand that this isn't how anything works. It's not like, the big tech companies should be giving people money to post on their platforms. That's not how. That's so unsustainable. Think of all the billions of things that go on Google a second, right? Google can't give everyone $1 for posting something on Google.
And Google is supposed to pay people out if they're potentially scamming the algorithm or something like that, or if they're artificially boosting stuff. Who do they know who they're supposed to pay? Who's actually Canadian, and they actually have to pay them out? And how many legal issues are they going to get with the Canadian government because you didn't pay out this person and they're actually Canadian? I can't believe you, and stuff like that. It's basically forcing Google to start
has 2 VPNs to scan the system to put him here, here, and here, so he technically posts something in Canada and doesn't get paid from Google, and then uses a shiesty lawyer to sue them and it's a sue to settle to give them like, okay, let's give this guy $100,000 just to shut up. Right?
Yeah, they're not saying like, hey, give people who generate views on Google News, give them like a fifth of the penny every single time they get a view, just because we're trying to increase their revenue a little bit. That's already not okay, because it's not Google's responsibility for paying you after already hosting you for free. What they're effectively doing is like what. How am I losing my point here? But it was like you're giving. It's not that you're just giving people, like a fifth of a penny for every view. They have to create an entire regulatory infrastructure inside of their own company in order to handle this, which will probably cost tens of millions of dollars a year. It's ridiculous. But this is how government becomes bloated. And no matter how much they spend every year, it seems like your service.
This is what the government does: is they create a new bureaucracy every few months to do something useless. And
it gets to the point where Google Canada and Meta Canada would probably effectively need another office in Ottawa so they can deal with the Heritage Ministry, so they can figure out what the new regulations are. It's unsustainable, and it's effectively also a way of Justin Trudeau being able to get a foothold into big tech himself, and so that he effectively has a corner office in big tech.
Yeah, and like just to drive the point home on C-18, like we get, like, you guys might not like Facebook, because you might be in Facebook jail right now, watching this, unable to comment. God bless you, doing your time in with some honor. But Facebook is a free means of us. We started a Facebook page, got over 75,000 people, and it's a great way, and it's free for us to get information out to people. And when you click on a National Telegraph article, you go off of Facebook, you come to our website, you scroll down, you pass by an ad. We get AdSense revenue for that. Like, we already make money off of Facebook and pay nothing, right? And it'd be absurd, because like Facebook doesn't want you clicking off Facebook going somewhere else. But Facebook is kind of fine with articles, links being up there and whatever, because you get good content. You're like, oh, I read this article on Facebook, thank you. Then you usually click off and go back to Facebook for a while. But
Facebook even has its own monetization program. You can literally go get your page monetized, and if you're doing a lot of live videos, and if you're putting out really good viral videos, they can put small ads that appear halfway through the video. They'll give you some money too. Yeah. The Google, it's not like AdSense that Google has set up that every single website on the planet pretty much uses. Like, there's some other ads companies out there that do it too, but they're like 60-70% of the market. It's not like Google is not used to paying people. They're just not used to paying people for simply being on the site. They're not even paying you per view based on the way that Justin Trudeau and Pablo Rodriguez have laid this out. They're like, no, you have to pay this person at least $100 flat for even putting the article on the thing, as if they bought the product from you, even though it's like if I walked into your store, put something on this shelf and said, well, you better give me some money for that. Yeah,
think of how many junk articles you'll get just to get the $100. Like,
there's sites that all they do is they just take other people's articles, use AI to slightly change the article, and then repost it. You're going to have to pay 18,000 different websites doing that in Canada.
Yeah, like if that, just think, that's a great point. Think of like the easy ways to scam this system if it goes in. That's the perfect one. Writing an AI that can recontextualize different articles. Start 3 different news outlets. A center one. Start 5. Far left, center right, far right, and just go through and have an AI that takes, okay, here's a really, really spicy rebel news article. All right, right-wing news. All right, here's a reasonable take from Terry Glavin on something. Center establishment stuff. All right, here's some Toronto. Here's anything in the Toronto Star. Lefty nonsense. Rework it, right? And if you have an AI doing, could do 100 of these a minute, or 100, and $100 per. Like this. Think of the scam. Think of the scam, and no one's reading these news sites. It doesn't matter, but you're putting it on Google. You call it journalism, and you can make tens of thousands of dollars easily.
But maybe going back quickly, just to sort of the
government.
Oh, sorry, I had to cut you off there for a second. But I was just gonna say the like going back to sort of getting the average Canadian on board. I think one thing that has to be sort of like looked at is like, and this is the frustrating thing with, to a certain extent, dealing with Canadians, all those disgusting Canadians out there, because like there's this weird kind of push and pull where Canadians don't like big business. At the same time, people constantly get faked out by policies that only empower big business. It's like when you see Jagmeet Singh whining at the guy who's like the CEO of whatever the like Loblaws, whatever his name is.
Weston.
Yeah, Galen Weston. Like it's literally every single thing Jagmeet Singh would want to do would make Superstore and Loblaws and like all the other places they own. Like it would make them all far more profitable if Jagmeet Singh does what he does. Because every single smaller independent grocery store would get wiped out by the regulation. He's like, well, you got to pay workers $17 an hour instead of $15. Like, dude. There would be nothing Loblaws would like better than to have to pay everyone a little bit more to put their competition out of business. And it's the same thing with this. Canadians, they hear, oh, Meta and Facebook, Meta and Google don't like the C-18 law. Well, they're a bunch of big tech organizations. They should have to give money. And it's like, do you guys don't realize that all this does is that it allows basically this is the legacy media and Justin Trudeau coordinating to shoot themselves in the foot and then demand that they need more Canadian taxpayer dollars in order to stay independent. Like, oh, well, because big tech won't pay us anymore, now the Canadian people have to give us another $250 million just so we can, pay the bills this Christmas. And like, just to take another rabbit hole, goodness, look at the actual the bylines on some of these legacy media articles. Just look at the person who's writing this thing. This person is being paid like $85,000 a year. They sit in their pajamas at home in like Etobicoke writing an article every 3 days for the CBC in which it was just basically a government press release that they got like an extra expert opinion, quote unquote, on. It's nonsense that we're having to pay for. We're not protecting independent media. Like even the legacy media itself has a lot of bloat in it. This is where, like, remember when you were doing more videos on watching the CBC? Or I think it was back when I was in Toronto with you. And it was when it was like those native people going to visit the Pope and they did the same story like 6 times in a 40-minute like news cycle. The legacy media sucks at its job. It's not like, well, we pay them $1 billion, but they give us a lot of content that maybe independent media wouldn't have covered. Independent media would cover all these issues. There's just no money in it because the legacy media will print 8 articles about it, about the exact same topic, by 8 different people who are each paid like 6 figures a year.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up one of the things that drives me nuts about Canada, which is the anti-big business attitudes that lead to the worst monopolies in the world. Right? Why do we pay so much for cell phone service? Because we have 2 cell phone companies, Rogers and Bell. Why? Because we try and over-regulate cell phone companies so much because the prices keep going up. Like,
TELUS still exists.
Learn that fire is hot. We don't ever learn that. Kids, touch the stove, it goes out. Right? Over-regulate the economy, things get more expensive. I can't. And regulations hurt small businesses more than they hurt gigantic corporate businesses. Well, I mean, you can incorporate a small business, but mega, transnational corporations can have armies of lawyers and money to get around regulations, and you don't. And the inability for Canadians to grasp this, and a lot of it is because the rhetoric in our media and politics, it just ignores this, and we bring on a stream of experts on economics who know zero about anything really.
Well, I think this is what happens is that the government and the media are very good at demonizing big business, and Canadians, because of all the social programs in Canada, have been kind of propagandized to think that the counterbalance to big business is not deregulation and small business competition, it's government, and government doesn't actually usually start, like in Canada, we don't really have that many national corporations, but what we do is we just fund winners, and the government effectively goes into business with certain big companies. So, like, at the end of the day, what people are effectively saying, well, big business sucks. Government, please give that big business more money and tell them to be slightly nicer to all of us. And it's so stupid. But yeah, I guess that's. But the funny thing is, I feel like social issues these days are actually the easier ones for conservatives to win on, because the fiscal issues are almost like boringly like banal. Like people don't want to hear about them, in the sense that they just assume that they know what they're talking about.
Let's yell at the trans again.
Yeah.
No, it's spicy. People, it's weird. It's weird. Someone's dressing up like a drag queen. They're going into the libraries. They're shaking their ass on the kids and saying this is how we teach them how to read. And
well, that's how I learned how to read.
I strongly disagree with why do we need this? So let's talk about the gender craze going on. Let's transition to a social issue here. We both wrote something this week. I think my article will come out tomorrow on.
Yeah, I talked more about the situation with Polyev and New Brunswick and Justin Trudeau, where, of course, New Brunswick Premier Blaine Higgs is changing policy 713 in terms of school sexual orientation and gender identity policy, and forcing schools, and not like forcing in terms of like forcing their hand, but, making them do the reasonable thing and actually inform parents if their child's trying to identify as a different gender at school, because of course the parents should know that. Yeah, Justin Trudeau freaks out. The legacy media freaks out. And we are at least happy to see that Pierre Poilievre came out and basically said, hey, leave provinces alone. And also parents should be the people who raise their kids, not schools. And of course, I just did the initial report, and Daniel tomorrow will be doing an article sort of laying out more of the political strategy of what was kind of brilliant about the way that Pierre waded into the issue.
Yeah, I mean, I can give a preview now. I mean, yeah, Wyatt summed it up right. There's a bill in New Brunswick changed. And a couple of weeks ago, Poilievre was asked about it, and he said that's a provincial issue, and he sort of punted on it. And a lot of people were mad that he didn't go harder on it. And I think the gamble paid off. And the gamble was this: or at least, listen, I don't ever accuse the Conservative Party of doing anything intelligent purposefully. This very well could have been a happy accident. In fact, it probably was. But by not jumping on this and not wading into a provincial issue, just saying it's a provincial issue, he baited Justin Trudeau, who has to say something about everything unless it's Quebec saying no more Muslims. So Trudeau came in and attacked Higgs because everyone needs to chop the genitals off of a 9-year-old all the time. This is our national pastime. It's what I do at home. It's how I distress myself. I go into a gender clinic and whoop, whoop. Progressive. But what he did here is he got involved in a provincial issue, right? Education is provincial. And who cares about this issue of provincial autonomy in New Brunswick more than New Brunswick? Quebec. You could very well see, if he fumbles this, the Bloc could strategically use this to say, here he is interfering in provincial issues, which is not what we want. And the Liberals can lose significant people in Quebec. Now, the other thing where this benefits the Conservatives, if they continue, there's a big caveat, if they continue. Someone eventually is going to say the PPC is doing a much better job of the gender identity stuff. They're going around Maxime Bernier, not debating on that. You're right. But what the CPC needs to do is they had to win here, because by Trudeau going into the provincial stuff first, it allows Poilievre to follow him into the issue, saying stay out of the province's jurisdiction, and then adding in, right, parental rights. So it's a good first step. He did provincial issue good and parental rights. So now the gender debate has been opened by Justin Trudeau. It doesn't look like Poilievre's trying to start this culture war. It just looks like he's pushing back. And I think there is an abundance of progress to be made electorally on this issue.
And again, it kind of goes to a video I made just a couple of days ago, that people tend to like to vote for people who are willing to speak about issues people are passionate about. This is where Aaron O'Toole was an absolute abysmal failure of a leader, not only because he was betraying Conservatives on issues they were passionate about, like guns, like the carbon tax, but it's because any issue he did wade into. This is why Aaron O'Toole releases 50 pages of policies that he's running on when he's in the leadership campaign, which nobody's going to read, because he thinks that if he just sort of throws in a lot of stuff there that nobody could disagree with, like, hey, maybe it would be good if we gave people $200 tax credits if they upgrade their AC systems or something in their house. Like, just nonsense.
Yeah.
Just any stuff that everyone would say, shrug their shoulders and say, yeah, I guess I don't mind that. But that's the whole point. No one's turning out for someone just for things that where people just don't like think that, oh, I guess that's not a bad idea. Like, no one's running out of the house at the start of the day to vote on that crap. There's a reason why people like Olivia Chow, no matter how crazy she is, can get elected as the mayor of Toronto, because even though the vast majority of people do not believe in the crazy stuff she believes in, she monopolizes the crazy people and drives them out to go vote for her. And this is where Blaine Higgs is doing the reverse for Conservatives, where he's actually, even though he actually was one of the most unpopular premiers in the country, which I think is going to reverse in the next little while here, that because he's actually targeting something that the parents of New Brunswick really care about, which is the safety of their children and their ability to raise their own kids, he's becoming wildly popular. 57% of Canadians agree with Blaine Higgs. Only 18% disagree with him. And in Atlantic Canada, it's 69% of people agree with Blaine Higgs. He's obviously glommed onto something that really is, it's you could say it's polarizing, but it's polarizing in the right direction, where people like to be on the winning moral team. And when you polarize, we're the good people, and rightfully so in this case, we're the good people standing up for the safety of children and parental rights against these weirdos who think that schools should raise the kids and then the parents just get to house them, that you are going to win a massive victory. If there's another provincial election, I think Blaine Higgs would sweep. Especially since he's basically monopolized the People's Alliance Party into his own party, because Chris Austin became the leader of that party, joined the PCs, and I think he's been the person actually in the background because he's a Baptist pastor. I guarantee he's the one who's been kind of giving them a bit of a moral spine on this issue, because he was the one who took the lead in their legislature to talk about it and talk about his own children and stuff like that. So I guarantee that that this is going to pay massive dividends. But again, talk about issues that people are passionate about and reframe the narratives that we're the smart, responsible, moral people up against the crazies. Whereas conservatives never do that. They just say, we like taxes, we like tax cuts. And then like Justin Trudeau gets to be like, these racist Nazis are trying to put trans kids in garbage disposals, and I'm here to save them. And it's like, and then you get all these like moronic people in the middle being like, that sounds reasonable. Yeah, I'm going to show up for Justin Trudeau because, Aaron's trying to kill kids or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about people like seeing winners on winning issues. Also, parental rights is a pretty big thing. People might not know this, but parents tend to care about their kids a lot. In fact, parents of children tend to be very pro their children. I know this is the hard-hitting, mind-bending commentary you come to this live stream for, but it is true. And when the government starts to get into the Seamus O'Regan territory of we know best, we're going to take your kids away, there's another narrative that this bounces off of. You see a lot of Indigenous people, rightfully so, bringing up what happened 60 and 30 years ago. It looks like every 30 years we're just going to try and take kids away from their families in Canada. That just seems what we're going to do. We'll have another wackadoodle in 2050. Like Trudeau's kid is going to be prime minister in 30 years, and we'll try this all again. But we had the 60s scoop. We had the 90s where the Liberals, I know best stuff to take kids out of bad homes, ended up taking a lot of Indigenous kids away from their families. And we get back to that now. So there's the narrative of they're coming after your kids again. This is sort of the government wants to, forcible government schooling of particular kids is a bit of a hot button in Canada recently due to the residential schools. I mean, what were the residential schools other than forcible government schools to take away from families and parents that we didn't think had the proper cultural values? I mean, this is the new age version of that. Were you going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, like, the logical conclusion to what the Liberals and the NDP are saying on this issue is, yeah, why not have kids just go to dorm, like boarding schools or residential schools every year? Because maybe a parent might be abusive, and because a parent in some theoretical future might be abusive because they find out their kid wants to be non-binary at school. Ergo, every parent should never be allowed to see their kids because something bad could happen. And of course, teachers and school administrators would never do anything bad. So because that's
there's so
the
many,
logic.
in the public
that's
school
literally the
system in
logic
Canada,
here.
I know of people who had sex with students and were not fired but moved schools. Because you can't fire teachers in Canada. You can't. They could literally have sex with minors and they don't get fired. They get moved.
Yeah,
in the middle
of the semester.
Institution that will know best when it comes to your kid's sexuality is the teachers' unions, who's never agreed to fire a teacher who abuses students.
But you get my point.
Who says there are two genders now because that's ideologically captured.
But you get my point. This is literally what they're arguing is that if there is a child being abused by their parents, it's not because suddenly their parents snapped when they said, "Hey, I might be a girl" or something like that, or I might be like non-binary. That's not a scenario that's ever taken place. If a parent's abusive, they were already abusive, and social services should be called, and the police should be involved, and that child should approach a school, like a principal or something, and get help. Of course. but they're basically saying, well, because there's this hypothetical we've invented where parents just fly off the handle if they're not because their kids tell them that they're like a different gender. Which again, let's be very honest, kids are only doing that because they're learning about it at school. It's not because the kid invented this themselves. But
like Daniel, non-binary isn't real, kids. Non-binary is made up. It's so obviously fake. It's called a bad haircut. Okay, you have no personality and a bad haircut. You're not non-binary. You have a worse haircut than Wyatt. This is what it is. And for anyone to come out and be like, "Oh, I'm non-binary," I discovered. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're boring. You're boring. Get a personality. Yeah. Learn to play sports. Break out an abacus if you have to. Do something.
Eat a burger.
Okay? So if your kid tells you they're non-binary, just laugh. Just start laughing. Don't beat them. Don't abuse them. Be like, and then be like, "That's not real."
Well, I think the real solution is like, that's not real, and then just move on. You just hold your government subsidized paper in your hand. You look down. You're like, okay. And then you just go back to it. But again, like, there's no parent that's actually abusing their kids because of this minor nonsense. But the thing is that they're like, well, a parent could abuse their kids, so we should quarantine people's kids from them. Ergo, there can never be any harm again. Because what you'll always see with these liberal policies is that theoretical harm that they can't even prove singular cases of outside of like 1 in a million cases. That's what bases so much liberal social policy these days. So much liberal social policy, especially when it comes to Indigenous people throughout history, is based on this sort of unforeseen harm sort of idea that basically, well, the government should just manage the lives of Indigenous people because, if they actually were given economic opportunities, well, maybe oil companies would be abusive and maybe something would happen to the land. So let's just keep them poor and then let's just give them money so that they can barely survive.
Yeah, I mean, I forgot what I was going to say here.
I took a weird turn, so I might have tripped you up there.
Yeah, you did. You kind of. I
did a really big bait and switch on the topic.
Yeah, it was a bit of a bait and switch. Okay, here the argument you make for hypothetical harm. Like, I can make the same argument, right? Like, I've heard stories of people who grew up in Islamic fundamentalist environments, and it was very abusive to someone, right? But you've also heard stories of people who are devout religious Muslims and they're fine parents and whatever. That's the majority of people, actually, right? But you can see a scenario in which any religion taken at a fundamentalist level from a bad actor can be abusive, right? You could have a Baptist father and mother who see their kids, not adhering perfectly to scripture and get abusive. But you made the point, like, those are abusive parents. It's not like they're perfectly fine, loving parents, and then all of a sudden it says, "Oh, mommy and daddy, I think I'm pansexual." Like, starts beating them. No, that's not it. Like, it's usually the kids who are like, "Oh, I didn't study the Bible or Quran correctly, and father came home a bit drunk."
I guarantee you, the liberals would be livid if we started having a program where severe opioid addicts would have their kids taken away from them to protect them and given to like a home for different children or whatever. Which you could argue the merits of that policy. That's maybe a slightly reasonable thing to do. Dude, the liberals would just say you're discriminating against people suffering from life-altering addictions. That would be the line that they would have on that. And again, the line, and this is the point where we could make the reverse argument, and the reverse argument would also be stupid, that we should have every single kid homeschooled because you can't trust the school administrators or whoever, because I can't call every second of the day and know what they're doing. Ergo, we should just ban public schools. Yeah. But that's also stupid. But the whole point is, like, how about we just all embrace a philosophy of reasonableness that a parent should probably be able to understand what's happening in the classroom if they're required to know that their kid took a Tylenol. That we should probably be able to know something that goes on in the classroom. I should know generally, like, what happens if your parents are just super, super academic focused and, you can't give Jimmy homework anymore because his parents will stress him out way too much because of all the workload and keep harping on him if we give him any homework because they're going to be wondering why he didn't do it in class. Everything can be everything can be turned up to 11 to create a world that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think it's a very immature mentality a lot of us have, is like, we want to solve these major issues and realize that they are ultimately unsolvable in a complete way, right? Like, for example, crime. I want to get rid of crime. And if snapping my fingers and saying a prayer to Jagmeet Singh would solve all of crime, I'd do it. But it won't, right? We can reduce crime, mitigate, put in good policies that punish abusers. If someone commits low-level crimes, they're not thrown immediately in with murders and whatever. There's a chance for rehabilitation. They maybe have to work to pay back damages to the people they committed against. So this teaches them how to work. It also gives justice to the victim. Like, we can do that. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a bad guy out there, and he's going to grab a gun or a knife and do something crazy. Or he just wants there's just going to be a guy who gets a thrill off of seeing a look of fear in a young woman's eyes in a dark alley, because that's what, like,
you're always going to have Ted Bundy types. There are people who are just actually evil. Like,
there's going to be bad parents out there.
Yeah,
and most parents try their absolute hardest and end up being good. But there's just going to be some ding-dongs out there who won't be able to get it right. And we have to be at peace with that, because if we go trying to define what makes a bad parent here and there, and we go in and we see people at their worst and we push people's buttons and people feel afraid to express themselves because then their kids might get taken away, you create bigger problems than you set out to solve. And like, that's where I think our have to be, is trying to mitigate and not exacerbate, but instead we try and solve problems with overarching Jagmeet, Olivia Chow level solutions.
I don't think you could actually do this in our current political and media environment, just because everyone would jump down your throat immediately from asking the question and try and act like you're implying something. But like, what do they actually mean by abuse too? I'd love for them to describe what abuse is, because I guarantee abuse is like, I don't let them use their own chosen pronouns at home. Exactly. I just call them a girl because it's a girl.
Discrimination under Ontario Human Rights Code. Like, this is one of the oldest longtime Daniel rants, circa 2016. The first time Jordan Peterson pointed out the Ontario Human Rights Code on gender identity and gender expression, I went and read it, and I was like, holy, this is crazy. Like, to protect gender expression, like, it overtly says not using someone's preferred pronouns counts as legal discrimination, and that's criminal discrimination. So isn't that not abusive? So,
and then say like, well, yeah, long-term discrimination is abusive or oppressive. I guarantee they'll eventually call it genocidal.
Like, you would agree, Wyatt, if a father drinks too much, comes home, demands his wife make him dinner, screams at her, and then if the kids make a noise, he just starts physically hitting them, that's abuse, right?
Yeah.
And this guy needs to be dealt with by the system. Like, that there's a level of abuse that we're not denying. So we're not denying that there are no bad abuse.
You know it when you see it.
Yeah, but it's like, if you force your kids to read the Quran and they don't want to, it's not abuse. Like, I'm giving the atheist example here, because there was a point where Richard Dawkins would claim this is abuse. And I'm like, no, it's not. Okay, if you make your kids read the Bible, that's not abuse. If you make them read the Bible or Quran and you stand over them, and when they make a mistake, you hit them with a belt, abuse, right? But just Zubir, study the Quran today after dinner and pray as a family, not abuse. But some people might think this is why you need to be so very careful with these things, because we live in a very fragile society where, like, oh, I think having to study the Bible really hurt my mental health. You say that to some counselor somewhere with a bad haircut, you know what I mean? And then the state can get involved, and
you already have that, where I don't think that there's a lot of public libraries or like school libraries that will not actually have the Bible in it, but you can get the book Genderqueer in it, if you know about that book. I think a lot of people do. It's infamous these days for basically just being pornography for children. But you could going back to the
I'm gonna take a stance and say porn is bad for kids.
Yeah, going back to the political implications of all this too. So, like, based on what we're talking about here, there's zero room for Justin Trudeau to gain any more supporters. When I went back there, it's 57% of Canadians nationally agree with Blaine Higgs, in spite of all of the propaganda against him. 57% agree with him, 18% disagree. the rest of the undecideds are obviously going to split in the direction of agreeing with Blaine Higgs just based on what the majority opinion is at the moment. And even if they don't, you still already have the majority. This is where the Conservative Party has to understand that, yeah, I think it was a good idea, whether it was the right way of doing it or not, that Poilievre effectively makes Trudeau try and own his crazy positions and then just takes the most reasonable positions. Like, I think parents should raise their kids. I mean, just let Justin Trudeau talk about how kids are being abused because their parents get oversight over the classroom. And then Pierre Poilievre going to show up and you're like, no, I don't think that's true. I think parents should know what's going on in the classroom. And that's it.
I think we should address the most recent comment from Jesse, because I do think this is sort of an underlying thing. We do have to deal with this is part of the gender stuff is I don't want to take it out on trans or gays or anyone there. This is high level commie bullshit. This is what, all right. So part of the cult is getting kids away from parental influence. The gender cult wants kids to trust the state and the state representatives of the parents. Yeah. And I think the gender cult is just using gender as a thing. It's communism, right? Or neo-communist bullshit.
Oh, it's this collectivist kind of be part of the collective proletariat family. All the anti.
I mean more than that. I do mean more than to me, it's high-level neo-communist bullshit coming from the universities. If you look at any group or most groups that tend to be advocating for Blacks, Hispanics, trans, gay, Muslim, whatever it is, if they follow sort of a leftist intersectional framework, Blacks, gays, trans, whoever it is, are all treated the same, right? BLM, right, is sort of like the Black critical race theory intersectional thing, whereas, the gender stuff is sort of from the queer theory. And queer theory and critical theory, they're pretty much the same thing, just changed a few letters here and there. The fundamentals of critical race theory is, right, the world is a zero-sum game. There's oppressor and oppressed, right? Instead of a proletariat and the bourgeoisie, and the proletariat is poor because the bourgeoisie has money that they should have, life is a zero-sum game, so redistribute the wealth. That's like communism, right? But the neo-communist stuff is you have oppressors and oppressed. So even on
top of that, that's the theory for critical theory. But there's also the practice of the theory that's incredibly insidious because, as the name implies, critical theory, the whole point of is going out and openly criticizing society. And because they believe in the zero-sum game, they will cynically criticize everything. Knowing that there's nothing to criticize, they will still criticize it, knowing that it is supposed to get their side more power. So everything must be sexist, because if everything's sexist, it's far easier to grab power for yourself. If you're reasonable, then you would have to basically cede ground and say that I'm not able to grab all the. You're basically ceding power away from yourself by saying that I can't criticize this for being racist or sexist or transphobic or whatever.
Yeah, and you're right about that. And I'll go to the queer theory stuff, because the queer theory is some of the most insidious stuff. The queer theory is a bit more open with this, right? Oppressor, oppressed, cishet, white, hetero. There was a patriarchal heteronormative structure, and the patriarchy and the Western patriarchy through capitalism tricked you into thinking that heterosexuality was the norm. Before capitalism, two men could have sex and get pregnant, apparently. But you get the thing. But the fundamental of queer theory, if you look at it, is anything that subverts the norms is good. So any subversion is given more moral value. And they put morality onto the heterosexual, cis white, blah, 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 blah. So if you're gay, you're subverting that is good. If you're gender queer, that's good. If you're trans, anything that subverts norms, it gives it value. And this is really dangerous because it pits heterosexuals like me against homosexuals, which I don't want to be against. Like, if two guys got married and moved into the apartment next door, doesn't affect me, right? If I legally had to join their marriage, affects me, but I don't, right? And I don't want to be at odds with them, but it puts these groups at odds because they're going. But also, this is why you have the minor attracted person community. I'm self-censoring to not get knocked by YouTube, although we're probably getting knocked by YouTube anyway. But you have these certain files. They all embrace queer theory because if the basic value is subversion of normalcy is good, who benefits off of that in a sexual context? What group of sexual fetish, let's say, criminals, benefits off of this type of ideology?
They truly define that restrictions are oppressive in and of themselves, and not restrictions to behavior, whether they're societally placed on you or just placed on yourself through your own morality. Is not obviously to any of us, that's a good thing, because actual ultimate freedom of just doing whatever you feel like all the time is not actual freedom. That's just chaos and just anarchy. That's just hedonism. Whereas the whole point is that they've now defined hedonism as actual freedom, which it's not. It's just like, and which is funny because all these people are usually like super big government types as well. They want government sanctioned criminal activity against people they're not supposed to be doing.
Well, they want everything that they want everything that they don't like made illegal, right? If they do it, it's fine, right?
Well, they also think that lack of visual representation at all times is also oppressive and like disgusting to them, to their sensibilities. That's why you'll have people say, well, why didn't they put up a pride flag in June? I can't believe them. As if it actually affects their lives. If certain colors do not appear in the window of a business, it literally does not mean anything. But in their supremacist worldview, everyone needs to support them, or you're not supporting them. Because again, it is a whole power game. That the whole point is that I'm supposed to be more important in your store than all the heterosexuals are.
Yeah, I was speaking with a friend who was talking about his workplace, and he's pretty based, and I won't say where I met him because it might give him away, but he's just telling me, dude, they hang all the pride banners all over the thing, the new one with the trans in it and the black and whatever, and they hung like the flags and the banners like over the dartboard in the office that he was like that they knew he used, so like the top of it was covered, and like you just can't say anything to anyone here, and everyone's afraid to speak out because like most people find it BS, but they know that there's 3 people in the office who are like, I'm a believer. And if they say, why do we need a whole month where this thing is just decorated in all these flags and they're like covering the things I use? Like, can we not do this? Like,
let's even do an example here where
people
would actually have some simple. Sure.
Quickly, I'll give an example. Like the point of this, though, with the new flag, always changing the flag, adding new things, it is conditioning submission, right? Every compromise you make, it makes it easier to make the next compromise. This is Jewish philosophy. Probably the Christians have it too. But like courage is a muscle type thing, right? Every act of bravery makes the next act of courage easier to do, but every act of capitulation makes the next act of capitulation also easier. So by continuing to push and make a month, no, make it a season, change the flag, put in intersex, put in non-binary, put in this, make a new flag. This is the new flag, right? So every year or 2 or whatever on this particular issue, you are pushing more and more of
well, yeah, it's like cultural revolution stuff that every 2 years we have to go and fight the olds every time, that there's just we have to destroy all the old values and stuff like that because the old values are somehow trying to genocide the people with the new values or whatever. But it's like, dude, if there was an entire month in terms of Holocaust remembrance or Holodomor remembrance, far better causes, also people would rightfully also get annoyed that it would go on an entire month. But funny thing is that those have never been pushed for an entire month in any way in a serious manner because people understand that it doesn't take more than even in a day. Really, that day is just to facilitate maybe one event that takes an hour and a half. People understand that you don't need to literally be focusing all of your energy to being against the Holocaust in order to be against the Holocaust and any sort of genocides in the future. You don't need an entire month where like people countering like we should have Family Pride Month or we should have Veterans Month. Like no. Stop at the months. We actually should eliminate days. I actually don't like how many days we have.
Exactly. There's more than 365 days.
There's talk like a pirate day.
I'm gonna take a stand against Holocaust remembrance. I'm Jewish. I had family who died in the Holocaust. I believe in Holocaust education. I think you should learn about the Holocaust. I think it would make you a more well-rounded person, just like you should learn about a lot of things in history. But the way we do Holocaust remembrance as like a government sanctioned, it's become nonsense, right? Like I'll ask the Jews in the chat, like, do you not get annoyed every time? Like the first thing someone compares everything to is the Holocaust. Everything I don't like is like the Holocaust. Everything like this, like there's, people have basically learned, the Holocaust is bad and it happened by bad people, but no one really knows what it like the real push behind it. Wyatt, you once made a great point to me about the Nazis' sort of socialist worldviews on land and Lebensraum and how like that instigated Nazi beliefs, but we don't teach that. People just know, it was racism, and we impose our modern day understanding of the race and culture onto the Nazis and say this instead of learning about the insidious nature of anti-Semitism in the 20th century. So, and I'll bring it back to the gay pride thing and just got off that topic for a second. as a tour guide for Toronto back in the day when I got out of university, I would do comedy at night, give tours during the day in Toronto. When Pride weekend happened, it was great for the city. Tons of people came in because we were a very liberal and accepting city. The city didn't really have to pay any money on Pride week. Everyone put up some flags here and there. It was fine. There was one massive parade. But I could tell you, like, Americans, if you're giving tours, you want Americans because they tip. Canadians second. Americans 1, Canadians 2, everyone else tied for last place. So you would get gay people with disposable income and coming into the city, spending money for a weekend, and it was great. It was better than the Pan Am Games, I can tell you that, right? But you had this every year where there was one weekend, all the gay couples from Southern Ontario sort of came in, spent money in the city. It lasted a weekend. Everyone got behind it. In university, hot girls went with their gay friends to Pride, and you could like go with them and be like, I'm progressive, and they sold ribs, and you could be like, yeah, and you could see pretty girls and you can hit on them. Like, that's the backbone of Pride. That's fun for a weekend. But you spread this out over a month, you spread it over the entire summer, it loses the event to it, and it doesn't bring, it doesn't do the good touristy thing you want it to do. And then people get tired of it. Like, I don't want to look at the same, like, I get tired of Christmas. Christmas is beautiful. I don't celebrate it. I love Christmas decorations. They're beautiful. But Christmas decorations would be so much better if they lasted 3 weeks, right? If it was like mid-December and then first week of January, it sort of came. If there was like a religious teaching around where and when to put up Christmas lights, like a week before and a week after, 2 weeks of Christmas lights, that'd be great because it'd be this special time of year. Oh, all the lights go up. Whoa. Oh, all the lights go down. Then you look forward to it the next month. And there's nothing wrong with Christmas. Christmas is like all good, right? But it's like when you see the Christmas lights in February, you're like, enough of it. Because stop. Like, give me a 2-week, whoa, right? But you lose the Christmassy feel when the guy has them up in February. This is the same general principle.
Yeah, also I was just going to quickly add, if anyone ever wants to get dogpiled on the internet, just start telling people about how the Nazis were actually socialists. It doesn't go very well. You'll be correct, but you'll have 10,000
I love one guy
people
here saying, my kid hates June now. She's 9.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, I think that I think you're actually going to have more people resent this as we go forward. The thing is that you already see through the polling. There's actually a lot of people who are actually becoming less accepting of gay marriage and gay people in general over time because it's becoming a bit flipping much. Because people people don't want. Because the thing is that, and again, it's not all gay people, of course, but of course, if that's where the high concentration is, that if there's someone who's non-binary in your class or your workplace, they are going to tell you about it, and that's going to be their personality, and they effectively become the local commissar for social issues in your area.
You're right.
And the thing is, it bleeds into everything. It's like how we give special rights for certain people to say things just simply because they come from a racial background. We're talking about racial discrimination, or we're talking about policing in Canada. We have a native guy to talk about it.
I think it's more than that. I think it's the fact that it now involves you. So, my generation, the millennials, 90s kids, we might have made some gay jokes back in our day, but we were all in favor of gay marriage because gay marriage doesn't affect me. Okay. Yeah. 2 guys get married 3 blocks that way. Doesn't affect me at all. Okay. And if you fine, but there's a new thing in the LGBTQ plus where it does affect me. I have to now look at Leah Thomas. I have to look at a man physically competing against a woman, and I have to believe that there is no difference. This now affects me because this is the concept of truth and by view and reality. Okay, men have bigger lungs and hearts than women do, even the same size. A 5'10" male and a 5'10" female. The 5'10" male has a bigger heart and bigger lungs. His shoulders are also broadened. His grip strength, right? His hands, female and male hands, are different in a skeletal way. Women are never going to be as fast as men because that's the evolutionary trade-off. Their hips widen to give birth.
But Daniel, he went on estrogen for 2 minutes.
But it's not even estrogen. This is the thing. It's we're supposed to believe, estrogen and testosterone make a man and a woman. This is my problem with Steven Crowder when he did the Change My Mind stuff on this issue. It's not that he got anything wrong. It's that by getting into the nitty gritty and trying to debunk this testosterone levels, the IHC, and this and that, it's not true. It's so into the weeds that you don't need this. Just go on men's shoulders broaden, hands are different than women, right? And we have bigger lungs. Can Leah Thomas get lung and heart surgery to give him a female lungs and heart to compete at the women? Like, this is where it's like, it's not like, oh, it doesn't affect you. This is like, no, if I have a girl and she's about to get a track scholarship, like there are girls who are like on the fringe of a scholarship, right? If one trans person enters the contest, that's one girl who's not getting their university paid for, who deserved it, right? This is now where it's actually starting to.
And again, it's not even like the thing is too. They're like, it's not like female and male sports has nothing to do with identity or trying to be like community building or something stupid like that. They're effectively different sports. They're literally different sports at that point, in the sense that if there was like, it's like if there was like there's a bike race with BMX bikes, and then there's one with like mountain bikes. Obviously, they are different sports. It doesn't, just because they're on bikes doesn't mean that one can just go into the other sport. The equipment that you use in the sport does not enter another sport for a reason. And that still goes with female and male athletes, that you're effectively using different equipment for the sport.
Yeah, that's the thing. So we're coming up on an hour. I would like to say, shout out this 9-year-old girl in the comment section I've been following. She's my new favorite 9-year-old. But not
Don't call 9-year-olds Daniel.
And I will point out, there are a lot of LGB organizations who are doing a great job, like LGB with a T, Gays Against Groomers. I think the best take on this whole stuff, it went viral. Somebody may have seen it, but Douglas Murray and Julie Bindel, a gay conservative British man and a lesbian liberal woman, just absolutely tear down the entire thing. This is Douglas Murray at his best. If you don't like Douglas Murray, what are you doing with your life? He's great, and I think it's the best hour the Spectator's ever put out. So that's how I'll finish it. Wyatt, do you have any final words?
I'm going to make a selfish plug for my legal fundraiser against Ted Zhou, in case anyone wants to give any money over to help me pay my legal bills. I've paid over $15,000 into defending myself so far. And so far the case is going well, and he's actually had to pay me money because of how incompetent him and his legal team are. So don't have to donate. You can. Helps me out a little bit. It's not like I'm going to die if you don't. So I guess that's my worst pitch for begging on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, the stories of foreign interference. Let's not pretend that the Globe and Mail was the first one in it, right? It was always alternative media. We get hit, we get silenced, we get censored, we get attacked. This is how the country works. And then stepping over our corpses like the heroes they are, the mainstream media walks in, takes our work, doesn't give us credit, and then uses their resources to defend themselves and then claim to be the victory. Support Wyatt Claypool and his quest against.
Another good Douglas Murray book. Although you just look up his book talk, just type in the name of it. It's Neoconservatism, Why We Need It, Douglas Murray Book Talk. It's a really good one on his first book he ever wrote, his first political book. But anyways, I think this has been a really great way of spending our first episode back for TNT Live, and we'll try and be doing this at least weekly. Maybe we'll just try and do it whenever we have a few hours at the end of the day, just sort of keep everyone informed. Because if Facebook or Google start blocking our stories because of what the Canadian government's doing, I guarantee that they'll still allow the live streams to go forward, because this stays on platform and is not considered news. It's just considered a video. So hopefully we'll be here in a few more days or so, or maybe next week. But until then, we'll see you guys